Good morning. I am Marianne Warlock, Co-Director of Strategic Initiatives and Performance Improvement, otherwise known as SIPI. Thank you for joining us today to discuss proposed changes to rules in Chapter 33, specifically subchapters A, B, C, and F. In the fall, the first round of a comprehensive reorganization of Chapter 33 occurred. Rules are adopted to conform to new statutory provisions for application review and protest in subchapter D, as well as emergency orders in subchapter G as a result of the sunset process. Subchapter E, events at temporary locations, were adopted in the fall and will be effective until September 1st, 2021. No changes in these three subchapters are required in the second phase of reorganization being discussed today. Changes in the subchapters A, C, and F to be discussed today are necessitated by the September 1st, 2021 transitions. However, none are substantive. Rather, they consolidate general provisions at the beginning of the chapter, update license and permit types as necessary, make updates for BRL consolidation and new AIMS procedures for submitting required certifications, and repeal provisions for license and permit types that will no longer exist on September 1st. What we know while we're all here is to discuss and comment on the proposed fees for two-year licenses and permits in Rule 3323. So that's what we're going to spend our allotted time discussing today. I'll turn it over to Shana in just a second, but two more comments. First, for today's discussion, we provided a Word version of the rules that shows all the additions and changes, and then a clean version if all those changes were adopted. Also included is a crosswalk that shows the before and after, and how an explanation for each of the changes. So if you have questions about any of the rules in subchapters A, C, or F, or even the changes in subchapter D, put them in the chat or email them to rules@tabc.text.gov. Second, we have a lot of inquiries already from cities and counties about local fees. With the old fees, is it new fees? When does it happen? How does it affect us? Lots of confusion, so I want to address that right now. Today, we're discussing fees for licenses and permits that will ultimately be in rule and effective September 1st. Cities and counties may levy a fee for licenses and permits that can't exceed 1/2 the fee set in code as of August 31st. So essentially nothing is changing for cities and counties. Even after September 1st, local governments will continue to use the fees that exist in the code today. The fees we're discussing in this meeting today have little to no impact on the fees local governments may now levy or will levy in the future. We will discuss this topic and many others when we host a virtual event this summer for local officials. More details will be forthcoming. Also, as required by the code, the agency will post to the website the maximum amount a city or county may levy, the maximum fee a city or a county may levy for each license and permit type. Now I will turn it over to Shana Horton.
Good morning. We are here to talk about fees, and so I'm going to give you a little overview of how our process for arriving at these proposed fees, and then we'll turn it over to you. This is your time. This is the conversation. This is the beginning of the conversation. We fully expect that there will be some adjustments. So these fees that are in the proposal aren't chiseled into stone. So thank you for participating early in the process so we can get these fees in good shape for proposal. So we started, of course, with the directive from the legislature in 2019 to develop a process for setting fees that ensures the amount of fees for an original or renewal certificate, permit, or license is sufficient to cover the costs incurred by the commission in administering the code. The process is required to, we were required to consider relevant information, including the type of business being regulated and the level of regulatory activities associated with each certificate, permit, or license. And we were allowed to set different fees for the same original or renewal if the commission determines that the level of regulatory activities it varies, and also required to ensure that these fees do not overly penalize any segment of the alcoholic beverage industry or impose undue hardship on small businesses. So these are the principles that guided our process. And what we did first was to assemble a task force from across the agency. So We have folks from licensing, audit, tax and marketing, legal, and law enforcement. Each division provided an analysis of the level of regulatory activity for their division for each permit type. And that was based on different metrics depending on, for example, law enforcement used complaints as part of their metrics and investigations and calls. And each division had a different way of determining or analyzing their level of regulatory activity. The legislature, we believe they intended for us to not collect more than we have been, to be essentially revenue neutral with our fees. And so we used revenues collected in the 2018-2019 biennium from permit and license fees as our target. Next, we allocated the fees across the new permit types according to the regulatory activity analyses provided by each division. Then we decided to weight law enforcement in a heavier way. And the reason there's a lot of reasons for that. But one is that, first of all, almost half of our agency's employees are law enforcement officers. So, between licensing, audit, tax and marketing, legal and law enforcement, those aren't equal in size and the amount of work and people hours that goes into each. So we, and the other reason is that also, as you know, we have to account for human trafficking law enforcement activities. And that's not something that's represented in a fee. So there's, one way to account for that was by putting some extra weight on that category. Finally, we went through the fees that came out and made sure that fees for similar licenses and permits, similar scope of privileges, had the same or similar fee, just to be fair. So essentially, we tried to be revenue neutral. These are based primarily on the level of regulatory activity and not individual policy decisions. We were pretty methodical and we tried to do a neutral process that complied with the legislature's directive. Of course, the reason we're doing this now is that we have to. We are required by law to adopt these fees by September 1st. Why does it look like there's a lot of increases? There's really three reasons why it looks like that. First is that we're consolidating 75 permits into 37. That's the main reason that some of these fees look higher. So we still have to cover the cost of regulation, but now we're spreading it across fewer permits. And most businesses will only need one permit going forward instead of multiple. That's the main reason. Second is that the cost of resources necessary for us to implement and enforce the law, the scope of our responsibilities have increased over time, but most fees have not increased in 10 to 15 years. Some have not significantly increased since 1983. So, over that period of time, of course, the cost of the cost of all of the resources that we need to do our job have increased, and we've also added on some new responsibilities, and the industry has grown leaps and bounds. So that's a second reason for some of the increases. And then third, there's also regulations and business models have evolved over time. And so as most of you are aware, there's some disparities in fees between members of industry that have similar scopes and privileges and costs of regulation that have just kind of evolved over time, but they don't really make sense anymore. For example, wineries have privileges similar to a brewery or distillery, so those fees should be in line with one another. So, those are kind of the top three reasons. Number one definitely being that we're having to collect the same amount of money, but with half the number of permits. And second, we've got costs that have increased over time and have not been updated in the fees in many years. And third, that we've got a few permits that just kind of got out of whack over the years, and we're trying to make sure everybody with similar privileges is paying a similar fee. What you're looking at is the first draft. Like I said, I expect that some of these fees will probably change before proposal on the 15th based on the input that we receive today and in the coming days. If you think a fee should be changed, please provide an alternate fee that you suggest and some kind of analysis to support your policy argument and suggested fee. That's what we're going to need in order to make these decisions and adjustments. So, we know that a lot of people are going to say they don't like the fee; it's too high, and that we understand but it would be much more helpful if you could say, this is how it's going to impact me. This is how it's going to impact other members of industry that are like me. And if you did a fee that was this, we would be able to manage that. So just if you can be very specific with your suggestions, that's what's going to enable us to make those changes here before the 15th or even after proposal if we need to. In addition to what we gave you on board docs for this meeting, our communications team has been putting together some really great resources regarding these fees that are on the website. So I would definitely direct you to look at everything on our website regarding these proposed fees. It's just so helpful. It's good visual representations and a lot of good information. So can we pull up the PDF? Let's skip down to the next page. Okay, who's driving? Okay, so this is just a visual representation of what I was saying earlier. We're going from 75 to 37, and that's a primary reason for these fees appearing to be higher in a lot of cases. Next. Factors in determining the new fees, primarily, like I said, was the agency costs of regulation, the amount of time and effort, and energy and resources that we spend on our duties with respect to each permit and license, with additional weight on that public safety, and trying to make sure that people are treated equally. Next. So here's where you need to go online for all of that, all of these documents that our communications team has put together. So you've got the licensing fee chart, an explainer video, a new license structure chart, and the consolidation explain chart. It's just really good information. I would direct you there, first, if you have any questions that are general. All right, next one. This is one of the visuals that our comms team put together that shows you how the consolidation of the permits kind of required us to lump together these consolidated, the ones that are going away into the ones that are going to exist after. We know that people don't all have all of these permits in the middle column, but we still have to collect that value, right, in order to cover our costs. So this is just intended to kind of show you how that happens, how that consolidation worked. Next page. This is one that I think is a good example of how we try to make fees fair between the various license and permit types by making sure that the folks that have similar licenses, similar privileges, are paying about the same amount. So you can see here that the brewer's permit and brewer's license and winery permit have similar privileges, and therefore they are going to have, I believe it's the same fee. So that's what this is intended to illustrate. Next slide. Next in the rulemaking process, for those of you who aren't familiar, right now through June 15th, we're talking to you, and we're potentially making changes to the fees based on your input. This, like I said, this is just a first draft. These aren't set in stone, and we do want to have, continue this conversation that we're having today over the next couple of weeks. On June 15th, the commission meets to vote on the proposed fees. July 13th, there will be another opportunity for you to come on a Zoom call, but it's for the formal public hearing on the proposed rules. Then after that, I will be drafting a response to any formal public comments that we received either at the public hearing or in writing. And I will make additional changes that at the direction of executive management based on those comments. So we've got kind of 2 comment periods going on here, but it's really an ongoing process. In August, the commission will meet to vote on the adoption of the rules and fees, and on September 1st, those fees will go into effect. So that's where we're going from here. To get in touch, you can email rules@tabc.texas.gov. You've got my phone number there. Reach out, talk to us. Let's keep the lines of communication open, because this is the beginning of the process that we need your input on. So I'll shut up now. This is your time. Because there are a lot of us, I think probably we're going to need to raise hands and then call on you to speak so that people aren't speaking over one another. So I will turn it over to you all now. Questions, comments on the Chapter 33 rules?
So we do have one question. Will the mixed beverage be on the same fee schedule it is currently?
Yeah, sure.
No, it is different because currently you pay one fee for an original and a separate fee for your first renewal, separate fee for your second renewal, and then for the third and subsequent renewals, a different fee. The proposed fee is a $6,000 fee for an original and $3,000 for all renewals. And that is the only license or permit type that has
2 different.
Yeah. Every other license or permit type has one fee for an original and renewal. But for the mixed beverage, because the public safety risk is higher in a mixed beverage premise than any other license or permit type. And the challenge is typically in the first couple of years. We do more operations in those first couple of years, receive more complaints in the first couple of years. That is why it is an increased fee for an original application, which would cover the first 2 years of existence. And then after that,
So will it be a 2-year? Okay, never mind. All right. Yes, those are 2-year fees. All of the fees are for 2 years except for temporaries, which are on a different.
Right, the nonprofit and the temporary event permit, which will be new September 1st. Obviously, it's for nonprofits, and it is $50 a day with a 2-day minimum and a 10-day maximum. That actually was established in rule back in the fall, and it becomes effective September 1st. Okay, I need to talk louder. Okay.
Are there any hands raised? No hands raised. Okay, there's one, Tyler. You can unmute yourself, I believe.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, I thought I'd kick it off, so maybe I'll start a trend here. I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Tyler Rudd. I am the Central States Council for Wine Institute. Wine Institute is a trade association comprised of about 1,000 California wineries and associated businesses. First, I want to thank you guys and everyone at TABC for taking the time to chat with me over the last couple of weeks about these proposed fees. I know setting the fees is a very difficult task, particularly in having to quantify the cost of administering and enforcing the licenses and permits while trying to be revenue neutral. That is a big task. So congrats for trying to do that as much as you can and for hosting these meetings so we can chat about it. I want to speak today about the proposed fees for 2 permits, the out-of-state winery direct shippers permit and the non-resident sellers permit. And stop me anytime if you want, but I'll just continue with my spiel. To discuss out-of-state winery direct shippers permit, I must first acknowledge that while the permittees are acting within Texas law, as the ongoing audits are showing, there is a problem in this state of those actors who are not permitted and are shipping to Texas customers without getting properly permitted or collecting and remitting taxes. This is a larger conversation that I hope we, the stakeholders and TABC, can have in due time. It is my opinion, however, that the proposed fee of $1,700 for the 2-year direct shippers permit would exacerbate this problem. A high fee such as this could make even the good actors prefer not to ship into Texas or simply not get permitted to do so, thereby increasing the amount of wine being illegally shipped into Texas. I know that neither the TABC nor the stakeholders want this. The proposed fee of $1,700 or $850 per year would be the second highest fee in the nation for direct shippers. And this is not what I consider a business-friendly fee. Particularly, the proposed fee would hurt small businesses. Wine Institute members range from the largest wineries in the world, like Gallo, to my friend's small winery that in Healdsburg that produces only 300 cases a year. While larger wineries that directly ship a lot of wine would be more able to afford the permit fee, the $1,700, the smaller wineries just cannot. I understand that Texas is a large market for wineries that directly ship. However, from the data that I've seen from one of the Wine Institute's associate members, small wineries make up most of the permitted out-of-state shippers. For example, from the data I've seen, of 1,100 out-of-state wineries permitted in Texas, only 26 ship more than 5,000 gallons per year. This is based on numbers from 2020. Almost 950 of those 1,100 wineries ship less than 1,000 gallons per year. So basically about 85% of direct shippers ship less than 1,000 gallons a year. That 85% represents the wineries that will hurt most with the proposed fee. And the same argument goes for the second permit I wanted to talk about. That's the non-resident shippers fee proposed at $2,100. That increase of over 300% would also hurt smaller wineries or wineries with small productions. Again, these wineries that sell a lot of wine in Texas will seemingly not have a problem with this fee. However, there are many boutique wineries with small productions that may choose not to sell into Texas through their wholesaler simply because the fee increase does not make sense. I'm thinking particularly of boutique wines or cult wines that are difficult to find but are available sparingly in Texas restaurants and in Texas package stores. Is paying $2,100 worth it to sell 1 or 2 cases in Texas? Many wineries will simply choose not to sell in Texas to the detriment of wine-loving Texas like myself. I just think there's a more business-friendly fee or fee structure that we can figure out to avoid hurting all of these small businesses, small wineries, while also ensuring that wineries that ship or sell large amounts in Texas pay their appropriate amount. And I'm happy to provide further information and share the data that I talked about with y'all so we can hopefully find a better fee for both the non-resident seller's permit and the direct shippers permit. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Those are really helpful comments, and it's really helpful to have that the numbers, that data. So thank you very much. Lance, you're up.
Okay, I sounds like my video is unable to start, or looks like it's unable to start, rather, not sounds like. Good morning, Lance Lively with the Texas Package Stores Association. I just wanted to say a couple of things about the fees. We've been shopping these around to our folks on the package store permit fees and the consolidation of a number of permits into the one fee. And so far, the feedback has been positive and good. So thank you for that. We'll continue to work with our folks to try to drill down more thoroughly now that session's over and we can really focus on this. But I do applaud y'all for your efforts. We've talked a lot about fees over the last 10 years. And I understand completely why you're doing it, and look forward to working with you on these moving forward. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly, I want to echo what Tyler Rudd just said. Our concern with large increases for out-of-state shippers permits, non-resident sellers permits, things like that. In the last 12 years, we've been working with the agency diligently to try to curb the illegal shipments of wine into Texas. It is a very, very big problem. We believe that the state is losing possibly tens to hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue due to illegal shipments of not just wine, but other products into the state. And an increase on a massive scale like that could potentially cause more people to go underground and ship illegally into Texas, and we don't want that. So I'm thankful that you said at the beginning that you would like us to work on any decrease or increase in fees with evidence or statements to back up why we want to see those. And I will do that. I'll get together with Tyler and talk to him about this as well. But again, thanks for what you're doing, and we will continue to look at these and work with you as we move forward. I appreciate it.
Thank you. If you want to answer the question. We have a question coming in through chat. It says, how is the increase of VQ fees to the same planned amount for BGs fair and equal? And the BG will now include the e-permit privileges, and the VQ does not have that privilege and no ability to sell for on-premise. Are the regulatory requirements the same?
Can we let Justin Eagle talk? And I will.
Okay, we're gonna develop a response to that, and Justin Engel, if you want to go ahead and speak, and we'll respond to this question when you're done.
Good morning. No video today, sorry about that. My name is Justin Engel. I'm the owner and cider maker at Houston Cider Company, as well as a board member of the Texas Cider Guild. We do understand the need for some permit and fee increases. However, the proposed permit fees for the winery, the G permits, rise about 400% from the base, just base G right now. Whereas the new fee structure actually encourages out-of-state producers coming into Texas while financially harming the in-state producers. There's about a $1,000 to $1,400 difference between an in-state producer versus an out-of-state producer for Texas right now. With going through some of the data that I was able to pull from the TABC website, I can't find a lot of wineries that have both public and private storage permits that would say that we need to pay an additional $800 for these types of permits onto our new fee structure. Sorry, what else? I'm trying to go through my notes real fast. Yeah, so based on the data that I was able to pull from the TABC public search, on average, most wineries will see about a 250 to 275% increase in the fee structure for additional permits that these wineries have yet to pull. For instance, my company, we have a G, a GF, and a no permit, so we're seeing a 250% increase just because of the storage fees, the storage permits that we've never needed or wanted. For most Texas wineries, they are small production facilities, and we see the increase as financially harmful to them. And sorry, I'm trying to find, and one thing, so House Bill 1545 had eliminated the winery festival fee. However, in your fee structure, that $378 is marked in the new fee. And so I'm also wondering why, if the legislature eliminated the winery festival fee, why that's being included into the new winery permit fee.
I can answer that question. So the permit was eliminated. However, that privilege is still a privilege that exists. It's just now being rolled into a different permit license type. So that's, they didn't do away with that privilege or our ability to charge a fee for that privilege. They just didn't want it to be a separate permit. And I hear what you're saying. It's kind of like, when you get the cable package and you don't really want to watch some of the channels that you get, but it's in the package. And I totally understand that argument. And I'm sure there are other people that feel the same way. So thank you for that comment. Let's see, did we ever figure out? Are you, is there anything else? Are you done with your comments? I want to cut you off.
Sorry. Yes, I'm done for the time being. I'll probably have more from some other winery members.
Okay. Then we'll respond to the question about the BG and BQ fees.
So the question was basically the increase of BQ, so the wine and beer off-premise is the same for the wine and beer on-premise. Is that fair when there seem to be different privileges? So a couple comments. One, they do have some similar requirements. I mean, the BG, the wine and beer on-premise has on and off privileges. Obviously, the wine and beer off-premise is solely off-premise, and primarily those would be convenience stores. So when we ran the data that Shana was referring to earlier, when you consider public safety, the BQs were second only to mixed beverages. So there is a huge public safety factor involved with the wine and beer off-premise retail permit type. For BQs, I'm sorry, for wine and beer on-premise, they came out about the same price point. Maybe the public safety wasn't as high as the off-premise, but they had other issues, regulatory issues from audit licensing and the efforts that go into, and law enforcement too. There are more things, there's things conducted at both BGs and BQs. And again, it was based on complaints, investigations, undercover operations, as well as the efforts of the regulatory side of the house from licensing and audit, and tax and marketing practices.
Okay, and I'm gonna pronounce this name wrong. Mr. Hussein.
Yes, good morning. I appreciate your effort on getting this meeting out and allowing us to comment on the issues and specifically the fees. I'm here in Dallas and I operate about 25 chain of convenience stores. And the fees that I'm seeing increasing is 326% for a BQ license. And earlier, y'all were mentioning that if somebody has a comment, he should come up with the data of how it impacts and what would the fee be. So my question to you is, I didn't see any of TABC's data. I just, it's just a comment that, hey, we have more regulatory and more law enforcement and more all of this, more all of that. That's the, from I'm coming, it'll be hurting the convenience store industry a lot. And I can just put up this argument versus TABC's argument of, hey, we have to do more. So I would, really like for you to present that data in the first place, because 326% increase, it's, over the course of 10 years, it's, by inflation standards and, everything else that's been put into place. So it doesn't seem to justify that, price. So I would really like to see, your data on that, and then probably we can come up with our own, and I'm seeing this across the board. It's the few comments that have been made by the participants. They all seem like in the range from 250 to 300 to 400%. So, even based on inflation, that seems quite a big jump. So I would really appreciate if I can have some more detailed insights into this from TABC, since they are the ones, taking this step. So, and I would think everybody else would agree here, instead of putting the burden on retailers and, individuals to come up with the data. So I hope you can comment on that. Thank you very much.
Right. So as I was describing earlier in our at the beginning, our process really didn't take into consideration those types of policy arguments. So our process was neutral on that. we just use the analyses of the regulatory activities required to make that allocation. So to the extent that you have a different policy argument for changing a fee, that's something that's what we're looking for from you. We just kind of did ours in a very neutral way, trying to do what the legislature told us to do to recover those costs. So, but I hear what you're saying, and if you have additional questions, just be sure to write down my phone number or email address, and we can follow up. Okay. Any other hands raised? Oh. Okay. Amy?
Yes.
Yes, go.
Thank you very much. I think, and I apologize, I joined tardy. Nobody that's worked with me would ever believe that. But so my apologies if I missed any information. But I'm hearing a lot of talk of evidence and data from colleagues. And I submitted an open records request on the last published rule, which had to do with the computer transformation, for evidence of all the documents that were used to write the preamble. And that's been over 3 months ago, and I've never been able to obtain that evidence. So when you do prepare your preamble, and I guess this is a question, do you not use evidence that not only you have formulated yourself, but you have formulated from the public? And will that evidence, when that publication comes about, be available to the people that are listening? I haven't been able to get it on a rule that's already passed. So perhaps that would be available when this rule is proposed.
I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but the way to get documents is to file a written request. I guess I'm just not sure exactly what you are wanting. And we have our open records team that processes those requests. And I'm sorry I don't have any information about your last request. Because
I think that what we're hearing, or what I'm hearing from the people that have joined us, is that they want to see what the commission used to establish the fees, so that they can present their counter arguments. And I'm just curious, will that data, public safety data, or whatever was used, is that available to the participants here today?
Well, I mean, some of it is going to be deliberative process protected, but some of it is the factual information is absolutely public. So if you can provide a request of what it is that you're seeking, we'll be able to analyze that. It's a case by case, as you know, we have to go case by case on those requests. So I can't say as a general rule, what exactly is going to be open or not. It's going to have to be analyzed individually.
Thank you.
And obviously the information that we get from the public, from stakeholders, that's all public information. So that's something that, if that is used, if your arguments and your data are used to change a fee, then that would likely show up in the preamble. Because
So just public comments, but not commission information.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't written it yet. It depends on where we end up, if I need to use that information or not. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how to answer your question, because it's very broad. So I think probably the way to do it is to offline, maybe see if we can figure out what it is that you are looking for, and whether or not we can give it to you. Because some things will be protected and some things won't. I mean, that's really the best I can do right now. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. And hopefully those listeners have heard that and understand what they can request.
Mr. Engel.
Yes, hi, good morning again. So a couple comments have been floating my way to ask. Could TABC provide a breakdown of regulatory and enforcement costs per proposed permit? You keep saying that these fees, or the cost to regulate is becoming more and more for TABC, but is it for, like, I'm going to say, for instance, in manufacturing, I'm going to assume that most of the costs are from the auditing department, because it's becoming a little bit more complicated to try to audit manufacturing. And if that is the case, has TABC actually investigated the auditing process and its effectiveness for some of these, for like manufacturers? I'm going to go personally here. We're currently under a 10-month-long pandemic audit, in which the audit is having to go investigate defunct wholesalers in which we bought a couple cases of wine from, mainly because the auditor doesn't know the difference between a bottle and a case. And the bottle that. And this is so right now, here's a 10-month auditing issue that's costing TABC a lot of money, which I think could be stemmed if auditing was a little bit more effective. But that's kind of a side note there. Along with this, could TABC provide a breakdown of each proposed permit and the current permit holders with their current subordinate permits for each permit class? So if you're trying to say that wineries need to have these both public and private storage permits, right now we're starting to see some discrepancies in actually which wineries carry the public and private storage permits. And I do understand that the consolidation is to remove as many permits as possible because of sunset. However, if one permittee right now just holds the private storage permit for all wineries, all wineries should not have to have these private storage permit fees tacked onto the new fee structure. Along with the cost, because we haven't seen any type of cost statements from TABC, what is the cost savings of using the AIM system? If TABC is going to a informatic computer-based process, there is the assumption that there will be fewer employees needed for the regulation, auditing, that type of information. So having this AIM system should be a cost savings to TABC, and that cost should also trickle down to the manufacturers, as well as the retailers and the wholesalers, the big permit systems. And then kind of finally, sorry to just kind of lay everything out there, what about the wineries who operate second tap rooms or second locations? Are the fees again $3,400 for the second location? Many wineries in Texas have multiple permits because the first location is the production area with a second winery permit of $850 for the tasting room. Now, are these wineries going to have to pay $6,800 because of the multiple locations, because of where the vineyard is actually at, and the tasting room, which could be 100 miles away from the growing area? That seems to be a big one right now that's floating up. And with that, I will mute myself again.
Okay, I want to respond to one of the comments you made, and this is kind of the bundling thing that I was talking about earlier. So the way that these consolidations work is it's not that we're requiring people to pay for additional things that they don't want. It's that those things have now been consolidated and we still have to recover the same amount of money. So it's not that we're tacking on additional money. It's that we're going backwards, right? We're going from, this is the amount we need to collect, and these are all of the things that we used to collect it from, and here's how we're going to make that work with this one bigger, more consolidated permit. So it's not that we didn't go kind of forward from a fee and then adding on. We actually kind of did it backwards the other way. So we understand that not everybody is going to use all the privileges that are in these consolidated permits. We know that, but the streamlining, the legislature did streamlining, so we're working with what they gave us.
And sorry, if I may interject here, I do understand the bundling process, the bundling aspect of it, but if less than 10% of the permit holders actually use this permit, TABC is now actually gaining revenue by tacking on that subordinate permit through a bundle to the 90% of the other members. thereby becoming not revenue neutral, but actually doing a revenue increase for permittees that never had that permit before. So even though, like, I'm going to pick on private storage because I know that one is the permit that a lot of wineries do not, that the sheer majority of wineries do not have. Right in that case right there, if we're having to pay for that permit, even though it's being bundled, TABC is now gaining revenue for a permit that wasn't, needed to go away because of sunset, but is what regulatory instances does TABC have now that if the majority of the wineries aren't using it, they're still probably not going to use it.
Yeah, I think my response remains the same, is that, we're not going to be, there's no incentive for us to over collect, or because we don't actually keep our money. Of course, it goes to general revenue. So what we tried to do and how we work this to make sure that we weren't over collecting or collecting more than we used to is to work backwards from what we had collected in 2018, 2019. So, I think that, and that's why we did it that way. That's why we started and, with the goal number, and then went backwards, because we didn't want to start building. We didn't go from, a permit fee and then adding on other fees and all of that and go forward. We tried to, and then we allocated based on that regulatory activity. So we just did it. Our analysis is just completely different from the way you're looking at it. And it ended up, we're not going to be over collecting more than our revenue. And we just tried to distribute it in a way that made sense due to regulatory activity. So I think this chart, if looking at the charts that are on the website, I think can be a little bit confusing, but what it's really intended to show is not that we're charging everybody for things that they don't want, but that there are lots of things that we're not having to collect in one permit rather than collecting over a lot of other permits. So so that's, yeah, it's just a different analysis, and I can assure you that that we're not going to be over collecting. We're not collecting 200 and whatever the private storage permit was, from everyone. That's just not how we did our analysis. But we can talk. I mean, if you want to talk more about it offline, please do feel free to call me, and I can walk you through that. And then as far as the Ames impacts, that's a good comment. I mean, we're really hoping that Ames helps us to streamline things, make things faster, and it probably will. But right now, we don't even have it online yet. So it's really hard for us to prognosticate how much that's going to save us. We will look at these fees again. I think, we have to do it, and the proposed rule is that we'll do it at least once every 4 years. But I think, it might be earlier than that with this first round, just depending on the data that we get, probably the first 2-year cycle, right? A whole cycle. Because, we are going to learn more about, our savings with Ames. We're going to learn more about what the mix of permits and licenses is going to be under the new regime. We're going to learn more about what the economy is going to be like during this recovery and after this recovery post-COVID. So there's a lot of data that is definitely going to inform us going forward if we need to make adjustments. And it's just, we're kind of in a hard spot because we've been asked to, figure out what we need and how to allocate it, but we're changing, lots of things are happening at the same time, right? We're changing to a whole new license and permit scheme. We're coming out of this, once in a lifetime pandemic, and we're switching the technology. So it's just, there's a lot happening at once, which makes it hard to, answer specific questions like how will this one thing impact things in the future. But, that's why we're going to have to come back and take a second look at these when we get good hard data to support those potential changes.
You also had a comment about, will a second location or second tasting room, would you have to have a second winery permit? And the answer is yes. And yes, it is a higher fee that has been proposed, but it is no different than the distillers or the brewers. Right now, I mean, a brewer pays 3,000 and change, and a distiller, the same thing. The wineries, distilleries, and breweries have very similar privileges. There are nuances, but very similar. So this was the opportunity to right-size fees. And you all know that the code is pieced together session after session. And the fees were quite different for those three producers of different alcohol types. So this was the opportunity to right-size them.
Okay, can we scroll up on the chat a little bit? There's a question. I can't see. Okay. Okay, so the question is there a specific reason why it was chosen to remove the fee difference of VGs between the counties with at least 1 million population from other localities, which I presume would require higher regulatory action? Similar question about removing reduced fees upon renewal.
Okay, so in the top 4 counties, for an original wine and beer retailer's permit, they pay $2,500 and renewals are $2,000. The other 251 counties in the state paid $903 for an original renewal. That is a vast difference. One of the charges to the agency was to evaluate, what is best. And in terms of regulation and law enforcement, we did not distinguish between top 4 counties and 251 other counties in terms of our effort. It was across the board. So we saw no reason to have a distinction between top 4 counties and everybody else. That's why there's one fee regardless of where the premise is located.
And then similar question about removing reduced fees upon renewal. So this, the reduced fees, we actually specifically considered the task force and exec management whether we wanted to do tiered or graduated fees. And essentially after looking at it closely, we realized that the amount of additional work that would require in audit and licensing to determine who qualifies for a certain tier of fee, and then to monitor that, make sure they continue to qualify, all the additional paperwork that we'd have to track down to, is it gross receipts or, there's a lot that goes on there. And the additional work would really offset any lower fee. So we'd have to charge more to do that additional work to figure out if you qualify. So it ended up being kind of a wash. And so we felt like, and we're trying to streamline, we're trying to make things simpler. So that was part of the legislature's charge. So after looking at that, we thought it was best to avoid that because it's not really a cost savings in the end. Next question. Where are we? Here it is.
Jen?
Okay. Why does streamlining mean burdening to shareholders? Streamlining should be more systems-based where we don't have to mail reports in and have a huge amount of paper floating. Agreed. And streamlining is, this is more of an Ames question. So this is, once we get Ames online in September, you should be able to do a lot more that's online, and there won't be a lot of mailing reports in and paper floating around. So you've got a compliance app that you can use, and then we'll have Ames, but that's really a question, not really a question about the Chapter 33 fees. Will there be any credit toward permit renewals for the number of days the state shut down alcohol providers, bars, wineries, breweries? Alcohol suppliers are required to close by state executive order. We could not do business even though legally permitted. That is also not part of this rule package. We still have to collect the amount that it costs us to run the agency. Regardless of those closure orders, which were the governor's office. So that's not something that wasn't our call. That was the governor's call. And yeah, and I'm not aware of any credits or anything like that for those days of closure. And then there's some other comments. Okay, Mr. Hussein.
Yes, my question regarding was BQ. There is no consolidation of any kind of permit in the BQ category. So I guess the whole increase in fee probably could be attributed to additional enforcement actions or auditing or things like that. But I've seen during the past 2 years, even the compliance has been gone online, and everybody has to do their own compliance reporting on their phones. So there aren't any agents coming out to check on them, and I guess there are significant cost savings in doing that. Our local TABC office has been shut down for the past year. There were no meetings. Everything has been already going online. So, I mean, if there are any cost savings, are they already included in the new calculations that you've already realized all those cost savings?
So the compliance reporting app that you mentioned, that is focused more on regulatory effort rather than law enforcement. So agents may not have visited, at least that you're aware of, but we still conduct undercover operations. So you may not know that they've been to your premise, but the compliance reporting app was in existence when we were considering all the different factors. That continues to grow in terms of people using that app, but we're not quite where we need to be. So the more people that use it, the more efficient everybody will be, but we're not there yet. As she has said, we will evaluate fees again in at least 4 years, if not sooner. So if between AIMS and compliance reporting and whatever else technology we might come up with to make everyone work more efficiently, if we need to make adjustments to lower them, we certainly would consider that. But for BQ, the biggest challenge is the law enforcement activity that is required. Again, based on the number of investigations and operations and complaints and activities that go on by law enforcement personnel in a BQ permit type.
Right, so if you'll remember, the law enforcement regulatory activities were weighted more heavily because it is half of our agency. And like Marianne said earlier, BQs are just second only to mixed beverage licenses and the amount of law enforcement work that has to be done. So that really is the explanation for the new fee. And again, we are only recovering we're trying to recover what we had recovered in fees and permits back in 2018, 2019. So I hope that helps answer your question. Is there more? Okay, let's see. Ms. Amaya? Counselor Amaya? Do you have a question or a comment? I see that you're unmuted, but I can't hear anything that you're saying if you are talking. Okay, we'll come back. Ms. Harrison.
They relate to the rule, and I'm hearing more general questions. Is this the right time to ask those questions that are more specific?
Sure, and if I can't answer it off the cuff, I can always you can always email it to me.
33.2D is in dog. Can you explain to the close of business on the 13th calendar day and what happens before that 13th day? Are those fees not due? Gosh, am I even on the right rule?
So 33.2D comes from, it's currently in 33.38 and 33.90 A through C. So
So the business is the 30th day.
Right. So this is already in our existing rules. It's just been
Okay, and the close of business, and I apologize, there's so many different close of businesses in different rules. Is close of business 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or 5 o'clock?
Oh, gosh, I don't know the answer to that question.
If we could have something consistent about what close of business means, because I know that there's a difference of opinion when it comes to the filing of temporaries and caterers. So if we could have some kind of definition about what that means, that would be helpful, especially in Ames, because I would assume most of these people are going to be doing Ames renewals, or at least we hope they are. And a lot of people think close of business is midnight because their business is open.
Right. Okay. That's thank you for that comment. Yeah, we're definitely, and as we do these rules, we're trying to improve them in any way we can. And it sounds like that's an area where we need to be more specific and explain what we mean. So I will take a look at that and see if we can't tweak that language to make it clearer.
Well, especially with in mind the fact that people will be hopefully using Ames. So I hope. Section E, applicants must pay, and then it just reiterates things. I know that there has been much discussion about who can pay those initial fees, and if it has to be a check drawn on the account, because many times when people are applying for their permit, they haven't yet opened those accounts. And so I'm just curious, is this going to, in Ames, will there be some functionality to ensure that those payments are being made by the account of the permit holder?
So
I just want some clarity.
Ames is not going to be able to track, if the check it's going to track it by the license or permit and the holder of the license or permit. So it's not going to track, Ames is not going to be tracking if your initial check was paid by a consultant. It's just not part of that functionality. But this rule, again, is just something that it's been part of the rules all along for food and beverage temporary permits. And so it just made sense for us to have a standardized rule for forms of payment. But yeah, I think in Ames, it's not going to be tracking if the check came from someone other than the license or permit holder. It's just going to be tracking it by the license or permit number.
Thank you. And then I dropped to C is in CAT. A person or an entity may file a commission in accordance with the practices, policies, and standards relating to the processing of applications. Will there be somewhere that the practices, policies, and standards will be published?
No, I mean, this is another one that it's already in the rule, so it's not a change. So I think that.
And with all due respect, Shannon, it's not a change, but what we're finding out here in the real world is that the practices, standards, and policies are no longer standards and no longer practices. And I'm guessing that those things are going to specifically change with Ames. And it would be very helpful if we're going to use language in a rule that the people can fall back to find out what that really means. So if at some point those practices, policies, and standards can be published, it would be very helpful.
I'm thinking we probably have some documentation, some things that have been prepared regarding, how Ames is going to be used. So I'll see if I can find something that might.
And jumping to I, I'm not rough as in my coworkers. If an application is granted based in part upon an authorization issued by TTB, my only question there is it foreseen that authorization will be required up front? Or is this language just being written so because a person will swear to the fact they hold it, and if it's found out later, then obviously they've not only lied, but they've provided something that wasn't in existence?
And that's one scenario that that this could cover, but the other scenario is that we grant it based on an actual authorization issued by the federal government, and then later the federal government rescinds it or finds out that they were given bad information. If that was part of the reason that your application was granted, then we're going to rescind it, cancel the license or permit. And this is really something that would be implicit. I mean, if you don't meet all the requirements, you don't get the license or permit. So it's just kind of saying specifically something that's just implicit in the agency's authority to require certain standards and issue licenses and permits. So we just wanted to make that explicit.
Great. Thank you.
Let me answer a couple questions before they roll off my screen.
Okay.
So it's sort of a long question, but I think the question is about why did we not keep the first renewal, second renewal, third renewal for the mixed beverage permits, especially when they're regulatory activities related to the mini bar and catering. Other than what I've already said, I mean, we wanted to simplify things. It is so complicated now with the different ways that one has to renew permits, whether it's based on which county you're in, or if you're first, second, third renewal. So we wanted to simplify. In terms of regulatory effort, there's more effort in trying to distinguish between the first, second, third renewal than just one renewal. So it simplified it for us. I think it simplifies it for industry. There doesn't seem to be an a significant increase in regulatory activity from the first to the second to third renewal and beyond. So, and when it comes to catering, September 1st, that term in terms of a permit will no longer exist. Obviously, y'all will hold catering events, but when it comes to the temporary event authorizations, which is the new term, yes, just like now, you'll have to submit either a file and use for a private event or a request for a temporary event authorization for an event that's public and probably of a bigger size. But you don't have to have a separate permit in order to conduct those activities. Not sure if that was the question or the answer you wanted, but if not, please type it again. Then there's another question about public and private storage being rolled into the G permit. And we still have to fill out paperwork to enable it. And it's just a money grab and a couple other comments. So yes, it is rolled in just like many of the other subordinates are rolled into the primary permit. When it comes to wineries and storage, there is nothing in the code that requires you to report to us. I don't think there's anything in our rules either about filling out a form in regards to storage for a winery permit. So I can't recall all Chapter 41 rules right now, but I don't recall anything in there about that.
Local certifications in Ames. So with regard to change in 33.3, filing new applications in Ames, how will local certifications be obtained and submitted? Will a new form be released to obtain these prior to filing online? So we're not doing the, what was it called? There's an initial pre-qualification packets anymore. And I'm trying to remember what they're going to do. Do you remember?
Yes. So I would suggest two things. Tune in next Wednesday, June 9th, for TABC Talks, where Retta Mosley, the CIO, will talk about onboarding in Ames and probably answer more Ames-related questions. I would also go look at the FAQs from the TABC Talks in May. this question was asked about certifications through Ames and how it's going to work. And so we provided some answers there to that. But the answer really is that as an applicant, you type in information and it will put some of that information into a template. The template you can then download and email to or take to the city or county and other authorities for certification. And then it will be uploaded into Ames. But more details and a probably much better way of putting it is in the FAQ response.
And then Marcus Schwartz, go ahead and jump in, and you can address all the rules at once. That's just fine. We can go through them however you want to do it.
Thank you, Shanna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. I guess let me start from the top. 33.2. As Ms. Harrison noted, I think with Ames coming online and everything else, close of business, it'd be good to know at least what that is so that we can make sure the industry knows when to file the applications. In E, section E of the same rule, this is more ticky-tack, but a check drawn on the account of a corporation applying for a permit. We have a bunch of different entities that hold permits, so maybe corporation isn't the best word there. I know what you're trying to get at, but I just think it makes sense to maybe clean that up. The entity applying for the permit or person or entity.
I literally just typed entity, so yes. Thank you. That's good. That's a good comment. Good, thanks.
Sure. 33.3 process to apply for a permit. Subsection J talks about if an application is granted based part upon an authorization by TTB and the TTB authorization was issued in error, then you can cancel a permit. I totally get that. My question, I guess, is on the implementation of that. Is that meant to get at wineries only, or is that also meant to entail, for instance, AP contract brewing or some type of premises change? I know there's no alternating premises, for instance, on TBC side, but there is with TTB. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what that's meant to encompass.
What that's targeting, what that's addressing. So it could be any of those situations. Matthew, you come up here.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
Matthew Cherry's going to come up and help me with this one.
Scoot you a little.
Hey, the main focus of that really is the wineries and the breweries and just their federal authorizations, like the brewer's notice and then the winery applicants, the permits and the application that they filed to operate and receive a winery premises. So it's mainly those two. We've had an instance where it turned out that TTB made approved an application in error. Company was operating for a little while. Auditors had to look at something, and then when they went back to look at the application, asked TTB something. TTB looked at it and said, "Oh, no, we never meant to approve this." So this rule really just kind of focuses on that and allows the agency to go in if we find that out and then rescind the permit essentially.
Understood. I appreciate that. The only one thing I'd say there is, and I can't speak to the situation you're referring to, but if it's something that TTB can clean up, in a day or two, and then all of a sudden the applicant has to go through a 3-month licensing process over again with TBC, that could be a sticky issue. So I just say, kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, and that's one reason that it's a may. There's discretion.
Understood. And appreciate it. 33.5, this is just in general, and I realize that your agency drafted this not knowing what might come out of the legislature, but there's SB 911, which I'm sure you guys know is on the governor's desk, which is going to, well, if it gets signed, you might want to do some tweaks just because of the off-premise, and it's no longer necessarily food service, but food sales. So, I would just say, bear that in mind. I'm sure you guys have that on your radar.
That'll be round 3 of changes to chapter 3.
What else you got?
Hold on. $33.25 refunds of license or permit fees. There's a specific subsection C that says there's no proration or refund fees of a food and beverage certificate. I'm just wondering why that one is kind of singled out when you've got a general, you're not going to prorate or refund fees.
I think it's just because it's always been in rule.
Yeah, it's just moved from another, this was moved from another rule, so it's just something that, I mean, we could, I guess, eliminate that since it's general, but it's, we just moved it from another spot so that it still exists.
Understood.
It might not be necessary, so I'll take a look.
And then somewhat in the interplay of that, subsection A, you know, the commission will refund a license or permit fee if it's not issued for any reason. If you look at 3326D, it says fees for a secondary license for permit or certificate will not be prorated or refunded. How does that interplay then with when you will refund if it's not issued for a reason? 3025A.
I don't know if I can answer that question. Shoot me that question by email and I'll talk with licensing about that. Can you repeat it one more time?
Sure. So 3326 subsection D says fees for a secondary license, permit, or certificate will not be prorated or refunded. If you look at 3325A, the fee for an original permit, blah, 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 the commission will refund if the license or fee is not issued for any reason. So it seems to say that, yes, we'll refund your primary permit fees, but we're going to keep the secondary license fees.
Yes, that's what it says. I think that's accurate. And I think this is how we operate now, I believe. Isn't it?
I think that was changed under.
No, that's not the way you operate now.
Well, let us look at that one.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it and like I said, if you can shoot me an email, just to, you know, so that I have that reminder, and then I'll go talk with licensing about how that works. Because we actually had a meeting about this exact topic, and I just am not recalling everything from it right now.
But E is, I think the reason E is in there is that it's will be remitted to the person that signed the check.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. But I'll look into that and
Understood. And I'm happy to shoot you an email.
yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, I couldn't answer that.
No problem.
Okay.
I think my last comment, and this isn't necessarily a new thing, but 3390, renewal of a license and permit after expiration. I think you've got it now. For a renewal application, failures to submit any requested information, corrections, forms, or fees within 14 days of the demand will constitute noncompliance, resulting in the expiration of the license or permit due to insufficiency of the application. My issue there is with the kind of, well, with the grace period. So for instance, if someone files 29 days before their expiration, because they can only file 30 days before now, and immediately get a request, if you don't comply in that 14 days, then you're still in, you know, your permit's still good for another 15 days as it's written right now within 14 days of demand. So I almost recommend adding after permit expiration. I think that's what's meant to entail. I'm just not sure how the timing works. And again, this isn't necessarily new language. I just think that while you're looking at this, maybe there could be some cleanup there.
Okay, I'll make a note of it. Thank you.
And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, let's see if there's any more comments on the chat. No more comments on the chat. Hands? I see, let's see. Well, Marcus is still unmuted, but I don't see any hands raised. Any other comments or questions? And again, this is just one way to communicate this meeting. The lines of communication are 100% open. You can call me, email rules@tabc.texas.gov. This time, in the next few weeks, a couple of weeks here are going to be, we'll want to communicate a lot with you. So please, the sooner the better, and the more analysis that you can help us with, the better. And let's see, do we have any more hands or questions?
One question.
One more question came in. Why didn't the mixed beverage permit fees increase to reflect additional privileges of MI or CE?
Yeah, for the mini bars.
Mini bars and yeah.
So, well, as we said before, we didn't just add the subordinates to the primary and come up with a new fee. It's based on all those factors we've mentioned previously. And I would say for mixed beverage, and I don't have the data, but let's say the majority of mixed beverages are in their third or a subsequent renewal period. So they're paying $2,102 right now if they just had the mixed beverage permit. So when you then add on the catering privilege and mini bars, then you're well beyond the $3,000 renewal proposed fee. So, I mean, I do think all that has been taken into consideration, all the privileges that the new mixed beverage permit holder will have.
Let's see. Ms. Harrison.
Have the cities, can you tell us what the legislation was that passed or that involves the cities and what they will be able to remit or be able to collect from the permit holders and how that sort of formulated into these fees, please?
So what local governments are able to levy had absolutely nothing to do with these proposed fees. The cities and counties may levy that fee. They don't have to. So that is completely up to them and separate from us. If you're asking about, I think it's HB 3789, 3879. 3897. Okay. So by Ms. T. And it has been sent to the governor. As far as I know, it's not been signed. What it says is, just to recap, local governments may levy a fee up to 50% of the fee in the code as of August 31st, 2021. However, the brewer's license and brewer's self-distribution license do not exist in the code on August 31st, 2021. They will exist on September 1st, 2021. So that bill said for the brewer's license and the brewer's self-distribution license, the city or county may levy up to 50% of the fee established in rule. So it's business as usual for all licenses, permits, except for the brand new brewer's license and brewer's self-distribution permit, and that 50% will come out of the fee that's established in rule. Everything else is based on what's in the code as of today.
Thank you.
Right, and then we will, of course, as required by law, will post online what the maximum that they may choose to charge is for each permit type. So that will go up on our website.
I'm going to make another plug for a virtual meeting that we'll have with local government this summer. So,
You know when that will be?
No, we have not set the date yet. In fact, we have a planning session at 1 o'clock today on it. So I would expect July, but don't hold me to that.
Great.
All right, well, it's 11:30. I think we are coming to a close here. Again, this is not the end of the conversation. If you have additional questions or comments, please do email or call. And email is really helpful for me, just because it gives me an opportunity to look into your question before responding. So I really do appreciate those. And it also creates that record so nothing falls through the cracks. If there's no more questions or comments, then I guess we will close this meeting for today. Keep in mind, okay, so my email address, or the email address that you should use is easier, is rules@tabc.texas.gov. And my phone number, what is my phone number? It's 512-206-3451. It was on the slide. Can you show the slide again? There we go. Yes. So there at the bottom, you can see how to get in touch. And you know, if it's a question for somebody else that I can't answer, I will make sure to direct it to the correct person, and we will just do our best to answer your questions and concerns and get this proposed rules in great shape before the 15th when we have our commission meeting. So thank you all for your careful review and for your comments today, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you on this rule package.